projective drawing, non-directive therapy technique, a play-based therapy. We are going to talk about what house tree people test is, the background, administration, history, timeline. My name is Alyssa Gray, and I'm presenting and narrating this PowerPoint. Next, sample questions, house interpretations, tree interpretations, people interpretations, and other interpretations. First, what is projective drawing, house tree, and people test? The HTP test is a projective test that is known for being ambiguous using unstructured and abstract stimuli. This is a non-directive, play-based personality test and based on measuring the personality, feelings, and the way people see themselves, feel themselves, and see their family and how they fit in their family. Based on the interpretation of drawings and responding to questions. About 60 questions, and in this PowerPoint, you show a sample of them. If we are told to draw some object, we might either be shy away for not being good enough, or we might enjoy the process itself, regardless of our artistic abilities. Whichever way, drawing gives us a sense of revisiting our childhood memories. That's why it's great for children, and full of such fun activities. Similar to writing, the act of drawing forms a powerful medium of us to let our emotions out. In fact, as we know, some of us might have experienced forms of art, including drawing, that seem stress-releasing. Behind the psychological personality test of the house tree person test, reading our minds and what we have scribbled and sketched on a sheet of paper. This is an example. You see the tree, the person, the house, and how the child expressed each object in their own way. Anyone over the age of 3 to 4 can take this test. Adolescents and children usually take the test, and it takes around 150 minutes to complete and interpret the test, having them draw the 2 phases, and also interpreting with the questions and objects. In order to administrate it, you need a piece of paper, white preferably. There will be 2 phases, so the first phase will be using crayons. You draw a house, tree, and people. The test will implement asking questions about the drawing. And the second phase will be drawn with a pencil or pen, and draw the house, tree, and people, and again, implement the questions about. The test. This test is a technique developed by John Buck, an early clinical psychologist in 1948, which was later updated in 1969. And such other contributions from him are remarkable, especially on the background of his meager and scattered formal training in psychology. House tree person test is a projective personality test wherein a person responds to a given stimuli and responds and gives clues about the hidden emotions or internal conflicts they are having. The timeline is 1926. It was first made. It was the very first kind of this would be based on the Good Enough's Drawing Man test, which is the original technique. 1926. 1935, Paul Schreiber used the tree and person touch, the core of personality, so that's when the tree was considered as well. Putting it all together, John Buck developed the test based on the Good Enough scale and intellectual functioning. Hammer in 1955 looked at the drawings for normal versus sex offenders, which is interesting. And then in 1969, John Buck revised the test. Some of the sample questions after the test. So after the test is taken, the first and second phase, in between the phases, drawing objects, administrator poses some questions. We ask, as I administered it, I would ask them the questions to reason behind and help understand the reason behind why they drew it. For instance, I would ask if the house was happy, what was the house made of, who stays at the house, who lives in a house, what is it like at night, the house, what's inside the house, for instance, a tree, is the tree alive, what kind of tree is it, how old would the tree be, who waters the tree. And with the people or the person, it's who is the person, how old is the person, how does the person feel, what does the person like, and accommodate, or I would simplify the question or make it more mature depending on the age appropriate for the client. Interpretations. Interpretation of the test, of the HPT test, is said to be a difficult task. So this is probably what would take the longest and just the time consuming of it, because it includes the qualitative and quantitative elements interpreting the results. The quantitative assessment methods are more considered appropriate with the progressive test methods, of course, but it needs both. The level of satisfaction with the house at the present degree of rigidity of the subject's personality, contact with reality, fears and obsessions, intrapersonal balance, and the person's subconscious picture, all things to consider and to analyze while symbolizing many ideas from the sketch. Also analyzing emotional strengths and attributes of the self-esteem and confidence that can be reflected by how dark and light the lines are drawing, flexibility, rigidity of the personality, and the strengths and ego that easily can be deciphered by the details of the drawing. House, the tree. So drawing the house and interpreting the house. The house is considered being an expression of the respondent's family's relations and family values. The roof stands for the intellectual side and spiritual life of the individual. Associated with fantasizing ideation too, and too little focus on the roof may suggest fears of ghosts in the attic. Walls might be related to the test taker's character strength, an indication of how strong one's ego is, perhaps. The doors and windows represent the individual's relations to the outside world and the level of social integration. The relation of the persons and the way they look at the outside world, the receptiveness of the interaction with others, and the perception about the environment. And then depending on the size, the house is small or big, it might mean a rejection of one's life at home. The trees. Another thing to look at for the house is the pathways. Those leading directly to the door exemplify accessibility and openness, unlike when there is no pathway, indicating a closed, solitary, and distant state of mind. A fence around the house could be a sign of defensiveness. When it comes to the tree trunk, the inner strength is represent the inner strength of the individual, and might be suggested from the tree trunk drawn. A slender trunk or large branches may suggest the need of satisfaction or for satisfaction, as dark shades for the trunk suggest anxiety about oneself. The tree is taught to suggest the deepest conscious aspects of the personality. The branches may show a degree of social connectedness. A tree with no branches indicates, for instance, the person has no contact with others, and the trunk is often seen as a representative of the inner strength, and the tree crowns stands for ideas, thoughts, and self-concepts. The branches, these might also hint towards an individual's relation with the external world, and the trees drawn without branches may indicate less contact with the external world. People. The person is symbolic representation of the ideal self in one's social interactions. The head symbolizes intelligence, communication, and imagination. The eyes indicate the perception of the world, and the hands give information about affectivity and aggressiveness. Observations about the person is placed on the page, and amount of detail shown from the drawing. The part significant interpretations. Parts that are shown. The person drawn of the same gender. If the person drawn of the same gender is usually taken to be the test taker himself or herself. Arms and hands, position of the hands, open or closed fists, specific gestures if indicate behavioral traits. Legs and feet, drawing or not drawing feet, the stance of or the overall body posture is reflected from little strokes of lines helping gauge inherent emotions like fear. Face, a lot of details and concentrated on the face of the person drawn can be representative of one's desire to represent oneself in an acceptable, satisfaction, adequate, and social light. Unfortunately, this test is not to be considered valid and reliable to many because it's very subjectively scored personality test. And the variations, however, of the test can be administered in 1 to 2 phases, both phases, 1 or 2. It's however the test giver wants to do it. All drawings on a single separate sheet paper, asking to draw 2 different persons, 1 of each gender, using crayons or pencils, but not both. So 1 at a time, but that's helps the phases. Any other interpretations, dimensions of objects, drawing and thought of indicative level of self-esteem and confidence. A very small house could show the dissatisfaction with the life at home. Level of detail, another revealing fact of outlining the respondent's personality through drawing. A very detailed face might indicate the need to represent oneself favorably in social light. On the contrary, pictures lacking details often indicate depression. Location of objects, everything matters with it. Objects on the page also change significance. Drawings close to the top of the page are considered being related to dreams and imagination, while the ones on the bottom are connected to the physical world. Drawing on the right side of the page is linked to the future, and the center are related to the present, and left is the past. Strokes and lines. The pressure and firmness and solidarity of the strokes and lines are indicated determination and decision-making facilities. The same line drawn twice shows insecurity, dissatisfaction, perfectionism, emotional strength, and high self-esteem, confidence. On the contrary, the reflected firmness of lines. These are all Omar Lopez. Took the time for the following icons and was in a representation today, as well as I narrated Alyssa Gray, and I narrated, created, and represented this PowerPoint, as well as developer of the HTP, John Buck, and the other references for the images and interpretations. Thank you all for listening to this PowerPoint of House Tree People Personality Test. My name's Alyssa Gray.